The neon lights of Station Omega cast an eerie glow across Commander James Blackwood's face as he adjusted his civilian disguise. 6 months of deep cover work had led to this moment. The intelligence about an interstellar trafficking ring was supposed to be his ticket back to a normal life in Space Command. Instead, fate had other plans. The underground auction house sprawled through the station's abandoned maintenance tunnels, a labyrinth of corruption where anything, and anyone, could be bought for the right price. James's stolen identity as a wealthy merchant had gotten him this far, but his stomach churned at the depravity around him. Lot 127, a rare prize, announced the auctioneer, a thin man with cybernetic eyes that gleamed in the dim light. A pure-blooded Celestian female, captured during the raid on Research Station Delta. James's attention snapped to the figure being led onto the stage. She moved with an otherworldly grace despite her restraints, her skin shimmering like starlight beneath the harsh lights. The Celestians were a mysterious species, known for their advanced technology and their ability to manipulate energy fields. This one's eyes blazed with defiance, scanning the crowd with undisguised contempt. Starting bid, 500,000 credits, the auctioneer called out. James's hand tightened around his datapad. His mission was to gather evidence, not intervene. 6 months of work, countless risks, all to infiltrate this organization. And yet, the bidding war escalated quickly. James found himself raising his hand, each bid driving the price higher. His combat-enhanced heart rate steadied as he focused on his new purpose. This wasn't about the mission anymore. Sold. To the gentleman in Section C for 2.5 million credits, the auctioneer announced with satisfaction. Minutes later, James was led to a private holding area. The Celestian woman stood in a containment field, her silver hair floating as if in a gentle breeze. Up close, he could see the intricate patterns that swirled across her skin, like constellations made flesh. "Your purchase, sir," a guard said, handing over a control bracelet. "She's been implanted with standard restraining tech. One push of this button will—" "That won't be necessary," James interrupted, taking the bracelet. He waited until the guard left before approaching the containment field. "I'm Commander James Blackwood, Space Command Intelligence," he said quietly. "I'm getting you out of here." The Celestian's eyes narrowed. "Why should I trust you, human?" "Because in about 3 minutes, this entire section is going to experience a catastrophic power failure," James replied, checking his watch. "And I'm your best chance at getting off this station alive." As if on cue, the lights flickered and died. Emergency sirens began to wail. In the chaos, James deactivated the containment field and removed her restraints. "I am called Naira," she said, rubbing her wrists. "And if you betray me, I will ensure your death is particularly unpleasant." James couldn't help but smile. "Noted. Now run." They raced through the darkened corridors, James's augmented vision guiding them past panicking crowds. His ship, the Stellar Wind, was docked in a private bay nearby. They were almost there when the first shots rang out. "Stop them," a voice bellowed. "The Celestian must not escape." James pushed Naira ahead. "Third corridor on the left, Bay 17. The ship's security will recognize you now. Go." "What about you?" she asked, hesitating. "I'll be right behind you." He drew his concealed weapon. "Someone has to slow them down." The firefight was brief but intense. James's combat training proved superior to the station's security forces, but a laser blast grazed his shoulder as he finally reached his ship. He found Naira in the cockpit, her hands dancing over the controls with surprising familiarity. "You know how to fly a human vessel?" "Your technology is primitive but adequate," she replied, not looking up. "I've bypassed their docking clamps. I suggest we leave immediately." James took the co-pilot's seat, wincing at his injury. "I'm starting to think I got the better end of this deal." The stellar wind broke free from Station Omega just as reinforcements arrived. Naira's piloting skills proved as impressive as her confidence, weaving through debris and defensive fire until they made the jump to hyperspace. In the sudden quiet, James felt the weight of his decision. He'd blown his cover, abandoned his mission, and would likely be branded a traitor by Space Command. And for what? He looked at Naira, who was studying the ship's navigation systems with intense curiosity. "Why did you really help me?" she asked suddenly, her luminescent eyes fixing him with an unblinking stare. "Because it was the right thing to do," James replied simply. "Sometimes that's reason enough." Naira was quiet for a long moment. "Your kind is puzzling. You wage wars, enslave others, and yet individuals among you would risk everything to help a stranger." "We're complicated that way," James said with a slight smile. "Look, I know you have no reason to trust me, but I have contacts who can help remove that restraining tech they implanted. After that, you're free to go wherever you want." "And what will you do?" "Surely your authorities will not look kindly on this action." James hadn't thought that far ahead. "I'll figure something out. One problem at a time." "Perhaps." Naira said slowly, "We can help each other. Those men back there, they are part of something larger. Something that threatens both our peoples." "I'm listening." As Naira began to explain, neither of them could have known that their chance encounter would spark a chain of events that would reshape the relationship between humans and Celestians forever. For now, they were simply two fugitives in a vast galaxy, bound together by a choice made in a moment of conscience. 3 days into their journey through the Outer Rim territories, James found himself increasingly fascinated by his Celestian companion. Naira moved about the stellar wind with ethereal grace, her natural bioluminescence casting subtle patterns on the ship's walls during the artificial night cycle. Despite her initial hostility, she proved to be an invaluable partner in navigating their precarious situation. "Your wound is healing incorrectly," she announced one evening, approaching his pilot's chair. James instinctively touched the laser burn on his shoulder, which still throbbed despite the medkit's treatments. "It's fine," he insisted, but Naira was already beside him, her silver eyes examining the injury with scientific precision. "Your medical technology is as primitive as your ship's," she said, placing her palm over the wound. A soft blue light emanated from her hand, and James felt an immediate cooling sensation. "We Celestians have natural healing abilities. Among my people, I was a medical researcher before." She trailed off, her expression darkening. James waited patiently, having learned that pushing for information only made her withdraw further. "The research station they took me from," she continued finally, "we were studying ways to combine Celestian healing techniques with human medical practices. It was meant to be a collaboration between our species. Instead, it became a target." The pain in his shoulder had completely vanished. James flexed his arm, amazed at the perfect mobility. "The syndicate that attacked the station, they weren't just after slaves, were they?" "No," Naira confirmed, moving to the navigation console. "They wanted our research. The ability to manipulate cellular energy could be weaponized. Imagine soldiers who could heal instantly, or bioweapons that could alter entire populations." James processed this information, pieces of a larger puzzle falling into place. That's why the price for Celestians was so high at the auction. They're not just selling people, they're selling biological data. A warning light flashed on the console, interrupting their conversation. "Speaking of prices," Naira said, "it seems someone is eager to collect 2 pursuit vessels, bearing syndicate signatures." "Already?" James quickly took the controls. "We're still 3 days from the safe house. How did they find us so quickly?" Naira's expression turned grim. "The restraining tech. It must have a tracking function I couldn't detect." She hesitated before adding, "You should leave me at the next port. I'm compromised." "Not happening," James replied firmly, plotting an evasive course. We just need to find someone who can remove it safely. I know a place, but it's going to be a rough ride getting there. The pursuit ships opened fire, their energy weapons illuminating the void. James dove the stellar wind into a nearby asteroid field, using the larger rocks as cover. Naira worked seamlessly with him, managing power distribution and shields without needing instruction. Their ships are faster, she observed calmly, but this field will force them to match our speed. The magnetic properties of these asteroids are also interfering with their targeting systems. Good eye, James said, impressed. Now watch this. He cut power to the main engines, letting momentum carry them behind a massive asteroid. The pursuing ship split up, trying to flank them. They think we're running, Naira realized, catching on to his plan. But we're hunting, James confirmed with a grin. As the first pursuer emerged around the asteroid, James fired the ship's mining laser, normally used for orbital resource collection, directly into the smaller vessel's engine core. The explosion created a chain reaction in the asteroid field, forcing the second ship to retreat or risk destruction. In the aftermath, Naira stared at James with newfound respect. That was, unexpectedly brilliant. Using industrial equipment as a weapon. Human ingenuity, he shrugged. We're good at improvising. He set a new course, taking them deeper into the Rim territories. Listen, about what you said before, about the research. I think you're right about this being bigger than just trafficking. My original mission was to gather intel on the syndicate's operations, but I kept finding connections to legitimate businesses, even some government officials. Corruption exists in all species, Naira said softly. Even among my people, there were those who wished to use our gifts for dominion rather than healing. It is why the majority of Celestians chose isolation from other races. But you didn't. You chose to work with humans. I believed, still believe, that together, our species could achieve something greater than either could alone. She turned to face him fully, her silver skin shimmering with emotion. Perhaps that is why I trust you, James Blackwood. Despite all evidence suggesting humans are dangerous and untrustworthy, you consistently prove that there is hope for understanding between us. James felt something shift in the air between them, a tension that had nothing to do with their pursuit or their mission. Before he could respond, another alarm sounded. The hyperdrive is destabilizing, Naira reported, switching seamlessly back to business. The stress from the asteroid field must have damaged it. We'll need to make repairs, James said, checking the NAV system. There's a mining colony about 6 hours from here. Independent operation, no official allegiance. Should be safe enough to. James, Naira interrupted, her voice urgent. The tracking signal, it's changed frequency. I think they're activating the restraining tech remotely. Her words were punctuated by a sudden gasp of pain, her knees buckling as she clutched her head. James caught her before she could fall, feeling helpless as her skin flickered like a dying star. Hold on, he whispered, cradling her trembling form. Just hold on. I'm not losing you. As he plotted an emergency course to the mining colony, James realized that what had started as a simple rescue had evolved into something far more complex. He wasn't just fighting for Naira's freedom anymore, he was fighting for a future where humans and Celestians could bridge their differences. And perhaps, though he wasn't ready to admit it yet, he was fighting for something even more personal. The mining colony of New Horizon was a collection of interconnected habitation domes sprawling across a mineral-rich asteroid. As the stellar wind limped into dock, James carried a semi-conscious Naira through dimly lit corridors, desperately searching for the one person who might be able to help them. You know, a gravelly voice called from the shadows, when most people want to visit an old friend, they call first. A woman emerged from a hidden doorway, her dark skin marked with luminescent tattoos that pulsed in sync with her cybernetic enhancements. She assessed the situation with augmented eyes that whirred softly as they focused. "Raven," James acknowledged, "we need your expertise. Now." Minutes later, they were in Raven's workshop, a cluttered space filled with salvaged tech and medical equipment. Naira lay on an examination table, her silver skin now pale and dull. The restraining tech's attack had left her barely conscious. "Nasty piece of work," Raven muttered, scanning Naira's neural implant. "Syndicate tech, but military grade. Someone's got friends in high places." Her fingers flew across holographic displays. "I can disable it, but removal's gonna be tricky. And you've got bigger problems." "What do you mean?" James asked, not taking his eyes off Naira. A news feed materialized in the air. "You're both famous. Look." The headline scrolled across the projection: "Space Command Officer Gone Rogue, Commander James Blackwood wanted for treason and alien trafficking." Below it was a bounty notice featuring both their images. "They're painting me as the trafficker," James realized, his jaw clenching. "Clever. Discredits any evidence I might have against them." "There's more," Raven said grimly. "They've called in Draken Vale." James felt his blood run cold. Draken Vale was legendary in the Outer Rim, a bounty hunter whose tracking skills were matched only by his ruthlessness. Half human, half Vardaxian, he possessed both human cunning and alien strength. "How long until you can remove the implant?" James asked. 6 hours minimum. And she'll need at least that long to recover. Raven began preparing her surgical tools. "I've got a panic room you can use. Off the grid, fully shielded." A weak voice interrupted them. "No, time." Naira's eyes fluttered open, glowing faintly. "He's already here." As if summoned by her words, an explosion rocked the colony. Emergency sirens blared as atmosphere containment shields activated. "Get her to the panic room," James ordered Raven. "I'll hold him off." "James," Naira called, reaching for him. "The data, in the implant. It's not just tracking tech. It's everything, proof of the corruption, the experiments, all of it. That's why they sent him." James squeezed her hand. "Then we'll make sure he doesn't get it." The next hours were a deadly game of cat and mouse through New Horizons' industrial sectors. Draken Vale proved every bit as formidable as his reputation suggested. Nearly 7 feet tall, with scaled skin and cybernetic enhancements visible beneath his armor, he moved with predatory grace through the colony. James used every trick he'd learned in special operations, but Vale seemed to anticipate his strategies. A pattern emerged: the hunter was hurting him, driving him away from Raven's workshop. Away from Naira. "Your reputation does you credit, Commander," Vale's deep voice echoed through the maintenance tunnels. "But this is pointless. Surrender the Celestian, and you might survive this." "You know I can't do that," James called back, setting up another ambush. "Can't? Or won't?" Vale's laugh rumbled like distant thunder. "I've studied you, Blackwood. Distinguished career, decorated officer, perfect record, until now. What changed? What makes this alien worth throwing everything away?" James didn't answer, but the question echoed in his mind. When had this mission become so personal? When had protecting Naira become more important than his duty, his career, his life? The firefight that followed was brutal. Vale's enhanced strength gave him an edge in close combat, but James's experience with zero-G operations helped him use the colony's variable gravity sectors to his advantage. Both men took hits, neither willing to back down. "You're fighting for the wrong side," James gasped after a particularly brutal exchange left them both bleeding. "The Syndicate, their government connections, they're using everyone, even you." "You think I don't know that?" Vale replied, wiping blue-tinted blood from his face. "But orders are orders, and credits are credits. The implant contains proof of everything they're doing. Help us expose them. Vale paused, his reptilian eyes narrowing. Proof means nothing without power to act on it. The corruption goes too deep. Then help us find that power, James pressed. You have connections throughout the rim. You know how they operate. Before Vale could respond, both their comms crackled to life. Raven's voice came through, tense and urgent. James, we've got company. Syndicate ships just dropped out of hyperspace. Military-grade weapons. They're not here to take prisoners. Vale's expression shifted subtly. They're not taking chances anymore. No witnesses, no evidence. They'll kill you too, James realized. Clean up all the loose ends. A moment of tense silence passed between them. Then Vale holstered his weapon. I know another way out of the colony. One they won't expect. But if we do this, I'm not doing it for you or your Celestian. I choose my own targets, and I don't like being used. James nodded slowly. That's fair. But we need to move fast. Naira. Your friend's workshop has already been breached, Vale interrupted. But there's something you should know about Celestians. They're far more resilient than humans think. As if to prove his point, the colony's power grid suddenly fluctuated wildly. Emergency lights flashed and gravity fields wavered. Through their comms came the sounds of chaos and confusion from the syndicate forces. It seems, Vale said with something almost like admiration, that your Celestian friend is done playing helpless. James allowed himself a grim smile. The hunter was right, he'd underestimated Naira. Now he just had to reach her before the syndicate recovered from whatever she'd done. As he and Vale moved through the darkened corridors, an unexpected alliance born of survival, James could only hope they weren't already too late. The stellar wind burst from New Horizons' hidden maintenance tunnel, riding a wave of plasma exhaust as the colony's reactor vented behind them. In the cockpit, James watched the pursuing syndicate ship scatter to avoid the radioactive cloud. Beside him, Naira's hands danced across the controls, her silver skin still glowing with residual energy from whatever she'd done to the colony's systems. That, Raven said from her position at the engineering station, was the craziest thing I've ever seen. And I once watched a man wrestle a Jovian space whale. The principle is simple, Naira replied, though her voice betrayed exhaustion. Your technology relies on contained energy. I simply encouraged it to become uncontained. From the back of the cockpit, Vale snorted. Simple, she says. She just overloaded a fusion reactor with her mind. The unlikely crew had barely escaped the colony, Naira's abilities and Vale's knowledge of the secret tunnel providing their salvation. The implant was gone, its data safely stored in an encrypted drive, but the price had been high. New Horizon would be uninhabitable for months. We need somewhere to regroup, James said, checking their fuel reserves. Somewhere off the normal trade routes. I know a place, Vale offered reluctantly. An old mining outpost in the Scarlet Nebula. The radiation interferes with tracking systems. It's where He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully, store sensitive information. James raised an eyebrow. You're being unusually helpful. The syndicate tried to kill me, Vale growled. I'm not being helpful. I'm getting even. Naira suddenly stiffened in her seat, her eyes going wide. Emergency broadcast, coming in on Celestian frequencies. Her hands shook as she decoded the message. No, 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 no. What is it? James moved to her side, concern overriding protocol. The research station, there was a second one. Hidden. They're using my people as test subjects. Trying to weaponize our abilities. She turned to James, her eyes burning with a mixture of fury and desperation. We have to help them. It's a trap, Vale stated flatly. Obviously, Raven agreed, but that doesn't mean we can ignore it. James studied the coordinates Naira had decoded. The station was deep in contested space, where jurisdiction was murky and laws were suggestions at best. How many Celestians? 23, Naira whispered. Including children. The cabin fell silent. Even Vale shifted uncomfortably. The nebula first, James decided. We need to review the data from the implant, gather resources. We go in blind, we're no help to anyone. The journey to Vale's hideout gave them time to plan, and to learn about each other. Raven's cybernetic expertise proved invaluable in decoding the implant's data, revealing layers of corruption that stunned even the cynical bounty hunter. Corporate manifests, military orders, genetic research logs, all pointing to a conspiracy spanning multiple governments. They're creating super soldiers, Raven explained, projecting her findings. Using Celestian DNA to enhance human subjects. But it's unstable. The test subjects, the results aren't pretty. My research was meant to help people, Naira said quietly. She sat close to James, their shoulders touching. Neither seemed aware of the gesture. To heal. Not this perversion. The question is, who do we trust with this information? James ran a hand through his hair, exhaustion evident in his features. Space Command is compromised, the Celestian Council is in isolation, and every criminal organization in the sector wants us dead. I might know someone, Vale offered unexpectedly. When everyone turned to look at him, he seemed almost embarrassed. There's a resistance movement. Small, but organized. They call themselves the Star Forge. Been a thorn in the syndicate's side for years. You're a member? Raven asked skeptically. No. But I've done jobs for them. They pay well and they have a code. He paused. Their leader, she was a test subject. One of the first. She survived, but it changed her. She's been working to expose the program ever since. James felt Naira tense beside him. You knew about the experiments all this time? I knew something was happening. Not the details. Not about your people. Vale met her accusing stare. I'm telling you now. Before anyone could respond, the ship's proximity alerts blared. 3 vessels had appeared on their sensors, emerging from the nebula's crimson clouds. Star-forged ships, Vale identified them. They're hailing us. The face that appeared on their comm screen was striking, a woman with silver-streaked hair and eyes that swirled with Celestian energy despite her human features. Draken Vale, she said, her voice carrying both authority and amusement. I heard you'd switched sides. Lyanna, Vale acknowledged. We have information you need. And a rescue mission you might be interested in. So I've heard. Lyanna's gaze swept over the crew, lingering on Naira. Welcome to the Resistance, Commander Blackwood. I hope you're ready for war. As arrangements were made to dock with the Star Forge fleet, James felt Naira's hand slip into his. Her touch sent a familiar spark through his system, but now it felt less like alien energy and more like coming home. Are you sure about this? She asked softly. Your career, your life. My life changed the moment I saw you, he replied, just as quiet. Everything since then has just been catching up to that fact. From their stations, Raven and Vale exchanged knowing looks but said nothing. As the stellar wind aligned with the Star Forge docking bay, they all knew they were crossing a point of no return. The war for the future of human-Celestian relations was about to begin, and their small crew would be at the heart of it. James squeezed Naira's hand, drawing strength from her presence. Whatever came next, they would face it together. In the heart of the Scarlet Nebula, surrounded by unlikely allies and facing impossible odds, he had never felt more certain of anything in his life. The secret research station hung in the void like a twisted metal spider, its dark corridors holding horrors that would haunt James for years to come. After 3 days of preparation with the Star Forge resistance, their strike team was ready. The plan was simple, but far from easy. Remember, Lyanna briefed them in the final hours, her hybrid eyes glowing with intensity. We have 3 objectives: free the Celestian prisoners, secure the research data, and plant the evidence in their main computer core. If we do this right, every major news network in both human and Celestian space will have proof of their crimes within hours. The Star Forge had provided them with a fleet of 5 ships, crewed by others like Lyanna, survivors and rebels dedicated to exposing the truth. Vale's underground contacts had furnished them with security codes and patrol schedules. Raven's technical expertise had given them access to the station systems. But it was Naira who had given them purpose. The holding cells are here, she pointed to the station schematic, her silver skin pulsing with barely contained emotion. The children will be scared. They'll need to see one of their own kind. James watched her from across the tactical table, marveling at her strength. In the days since joining the Star Forge, she had transformed from a survivor into a leader, her natural healing abilities helping other hybrid survivors while she planned the rescue of her people. The strike team moves in 30 minutes, Lyanna announced. Get ready. As the others filed out, James caught Naira's arm. Wait. She turned to him, her luminescent eyes searching his face. James? I need to tell you something. In case. He took a deep breath. In case things don't go as planned. Don't, she said softly, placing her hand over his heart. I already know. I've known since you first removed my chains. The kiss that followed was like touching a star, warm, electric, and filled with light. When they parted, both of them were glowing faintly, her energy resonating with the traces of her healing still present in his system. Well, that's new, James said with a smile. There is much about Celestian biology you still don't understand, she replied, a hint of mischief in her voice. Perhaps, after this is over, I can teach you. The mission began with precision and swiftly descended into chaos. Despite their planning, the Syndicate had one final surprise, a squad of partially transformed hybrid soldiers, their bodies twisted by failed experiments but their strength undeniable. They're not stopping. Raven shouted over the comm as she worked to hack the station security. The pain suppressors are making them immune to standard weapons. Vale, fighting beside her, grabbed a fallen hybrid's weapon. Then we make them stop. No one deserves to live like this. In the research sector, Lyanna and her Star Forge warriors engaged the station's security forces, their own hybrid abilities evening the odds. The evidence was uploaded amidst a storm of gunfire and energy blasts. But it was in the holding cells that the real battle took place. James and Naira found the imprisoned Celestians, including 5 children whose light had been dimmed but not extinguished by their captivity. As Naira worked to free them, James held off waves of security forces. The transport is ready, he called, his weapon running dangerously low on power. We need to move. That's when Station Commander Richards arrived with the last squad of hybrid soldiers. The man responsible for the entire program stood behind his twisted creations, his uniform adorned with both military and corporate insignias. You can't stop progress, he sneered. Humanity needs this power. We'll never survive in this galaxy without it. This isn't progress, Naira said, stepping forward. The freed Celestians gathered behind her, even the children joining hands. This is fear. And fear will never be stronger than unity. What happened next would be debated in scientific circles for years to come. The Celestians, led by Naira, joined their energy into a single harmonious field. The hybrid soldiers, their bodies saturated with corrupted Celestian DNA, resonated with the field. In a flash of brilliant light, the mutations began to stabilize. The hybrids, their minds clearing as their pain subsided, turned on Richards. The station commander's own creations became his captors. As alarms blared announcing the station's imminent self-destruct sequence, the combined teams rushed to evacuate. The Star Forge fleet waited at the extraction point, covering their escape as syndicate reinforcements arrived too late. From the bridge of the stellar wind, James watched the research station explode, taking its dark secrets into oblivion. But they had won something greater than destruction. The evidence was already spreading across the galaxy, and with it, hope for a new understanding between species. 1 month later, on a peaceful garden world at the edge of known space, James stood with Naira as representatives from both human and Celestian governments signed the first true accord between their peoples. The Star Forge, now recognized as a legitimate peacekeeping force, would oversee the implementation of new laws preventing genetic exploitation. "The children are recovering well," Naira told him, watching the sunset paint the sky in colors that matched her skin. "And the stabilized hybrids are finding their place. Even Vale has started helping them track down others who were taken." "And what about you?" James asked, taking her glowing hand in his. "Found your place yet?" She turned to him, her dual-toned eyes reflecting both stars and hope. "I believe I found it the moment a certain human decided to break all the rules to save me." "Best decision I ever made," he replied, pulling her close. "Indeed," she smiled. "Though your technique for undercover work needs significant improvement." As they laughed together, their energies mingling in the gathering dusk, James reflected that some chains, those of prejudice, fear, and isolation, could only be broken by love. Their story would become legend, but more importantly, it would become hope, proof that in the vastness of space, hearts could bridge any distance, and love could transform entire worlds. Around them, the garden world's native flowers began to glow in response to their combined energy, creating a light show that rivaled the stars above. The future stretched before them, as infinite as space itself, and they would explore it together.